Todo mundo sabe o que é tradição, mas ninguém sabe quando ela nasce. Harvard levou 140 anos para virar universidade, mas os tempos mudaram. Hoje, tradicional é procurar na internet. Há 20 anos, era na enciclopédia. A tradição agora é usar o WhatsApp. 6 anos atrás, era o SMS, lembra? Hoje, para construir um legado, você não olha para trás, e sim para frente. Porque tradição é mirar as próximas revoluções da medicina. É ter professores que são referência em todo o Brasil. É usar tecnologia para inovar no método pedagógico. É ter parcerias com instituições de ponta, como Stanford e Emory. Tradição é formar agora os profissionais da medicina do futuro. Medicina Pfizer, nota 5 no MEC. Pfizer, nasce uma nova tradição.
Boa noite a todos, senhoras, senhores. A Pfizer, Faculdade da Saúde e Ecologia Humana, tem a honra de recebê-los aqui no 2º Simpósio Internacional da Saúde Global e Doenças Emergentes e Reemergentes. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Pfizer, Faculdade da Saúde e Ecologia Humana, has the honor of receiving all of you here in the 2nd International Symposium of Global Health and Emerging and Reemerging Diseases. Bom, de agora em diante nós vamos falar em inglês, os pronunciamentos serão em inglês, porque nós estamos transmitindo ao vivo pela internet para pessoas no mundo todo, ok? From now on, we'll follow our pronouncements only in English, since we are being broadcasted live to people from all over the world. We register and appreciate the presence of our hosts, partners, and guests. Dr. Ricardo Guimarães, the president of the Pfizer Maintenance, founder and president of Hospital de Olhos de Minas Gerais. Dr. José Antônio Ferreira, leader of Pfizer's International Program and PhD in Infectious Diseases by Stanford University. Dr. Juan Leon and Dr. Jessica Fairley from Emory University. Dr. Desiree Lebeau from Stanford University. Dr. Michael Maurer, I guess I pronounced it correctly, from Miami University. Dr. Alexander Lavery from Kaiser Permanente Redwood City Medical Center. Thank you. Universalize knowledge and integrate wisdom with other teaching and research institutions are the main objectives for Pfizer. With this purpose, a decade ago, Pfizer started an international program in partnership with major US universities, and this program put Pfizer on the map of important research in the area of global health. The international program of Pfizer also brings the real opportunity for medical students and Pfizer's teachers to make an exchange in observership with the foreign partners here in Brazil and in the USA. This year, we are celebrating 10 years of the collaboration program between Pfizer and Emory University, a program that offers unique opportunities for Pfizer's students to learn from research in the area of epidemiology and infectology. An international program in the area of medical research requires a network of partner institutions with health units for field work and patient care. Pfizer has agreements signed with reference units that work fighting against contagious infectious diseases in the metropolitan area of Belo Horizonte and abroad. Today, we are honored to be able to carry out our work for global health and to conduct this 2nd International Symposium of Global Health and Emerging and Reemerging Diseases, next to partners as Emory University, Stanford University, University of Miami, and Kaiser Permanente. And to make the opening speech, we invite the president of the Pfizer Maintenance, the founder and president of Hospital de Olhos de Minas Gerais, Dr. Ricardo Guimarães.
Thank you, Laura. And I have to just to thank you all for coming to Belo Horizonte to join us in this celebration of, I guess, very important moment, at least for us, celebrating the 10 years of relationship. This relationship is due a lot to your dedication. We have to thank you, José Antonio, as a leader of the process of internationalization that we hope will bring a lot of gains for all of us in the Pfizer, to the medical students of Pfizer, but we also hope that we can create or increment this relationship with new programs, new opportunities that will allow us the chance of gaining from each other this relationship. Most of my dedication to medicine is linked to research. The research is the part of medicine that I like the most. Although I am in the healthcare for most of my life, my beginning was in research. And I was very fortunate in that in the last 10 years I have been able to dedicate a lot of my work to research. My field is vision, but I feel like it's a new field. We have been able to progress, and our lab, which is a lab in partnership with our major university, Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, we have been able to create an international interest among other researchers in the field. And so I'm not an infectious disease directly, but I am also, most of all, I'm a researcher like you. And again, welcome everyone, and I hope that we have chances to increment this project in the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ricardo. And now we have to ask Dr. José Antônio Ferreira to come here. And he's the leader of Pfizer's international program and PhD in infectious diseases, as I said, by Stanford University. And he'll make the lecture 10 years of international program at Pfizer, learning across borders.
Good evening. So thanks so much for everybody to come here. I know it's not easy to come on Tuesday night or evening and be a part of a scientific meeting. So thanks for all the students, for all efforts to be here. And I need to say thanks to Dr. Ricardo and the other directors of Pfizer. They are not here, but really this is a dream that came true. And we are celebrating 10 years just because Pfizer believing in what we are doing. And I want to thank my friends here, not only colleagues, my friends, for taking flights, hours of flight to be here, to share a little bit of your knowledge with this group here. So thank you so much. And I think this symposium will be a great opportunity for us to open discussions on possibly areas of collaboration or expand our collaborations in another area. So thank you so much. Well, I prepare a presentation where I want to briefly review here what we have been doing during this past 10 years. I can tell you it has been an exciting journey to build all this program. Of course, you will see in the photos that I will show, we have hundreds of people involved in this program already. So, and let's move forward, and then at the end, I can open for questions, but and I will explain a little bit the small changes we made in the program, because Dr. Michelle Berry, another speaker that was planning to be here with us tonight, she's not here for health or personal issues, but we will keep moving forward our program. So let's talk a little bit about this 10 years of educational and research program at Pfizer. So someone can help me here just to, okay, this is working, and this is not working. Oh, there we go. It's better now? Okay, thank you so much. All right, so I have two goals, main goals for this presentation here. So I will try to address all these goals very quickly, or try to be very focused in the main ideas to share with you. But I will review a little bit about the impact of globalization. Our symposium is about global health, so we need to understand just quick words about what is global health, or what global health means for us. And of course, my area is infectious disease, and I will share some ideas, quick ideas, because our main focus is really discuss the international program at Pfizer. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of globalization on infectious disease and public health, and then we will understand the areas that we are doing research together with these international partners. So, but what does globalization mean? So we need to think that global health is an important new concept. So we are talking about health problems that are not only related to Brazil, but transcend national boundaries and may be influenced by circumstance experience in other countries. So Brazil is too small for us to think that the health problems are only related to Brazil. We have issues growing abroad, and we are trying to address these problems when we are thinking about global health. So this is the main concept of global health, and we have been working hard to try to solve many issues in these areas. So we need to understand that global influence, the influence of health, are very diverse. So we have demographic, social change, we have economical change, we have environmental, climate change. So we'll be discussing some issues during our conference that will be related to this, but it's important to keep in our minds that global health or public health is related to a very diverse factors. And this is an image that I really like to present or to show in my presentations. This is an image that showed the number of flights, international flights. Each number of these is an international flight. It's an airplane crossing the oceans. And so this taking us that clear idea that the disease are not restricted to geographic areas. So you can take an airplane in Brazil and going to visit Mike in Miami, and you cross the continent and arrive in Miami in few hours. And you can have a disease, an incubation period for this disease, and develop the symptoms in the United States. So this is interesting. This is a very interesting topic. So the traveling, the international travels, and how this impacts all these global health issues. We have also issues related to globalization associated with urban movements. We have immigration issues. I will not discuss this. This is not the focus for our discussion here tonight, but this is a reality too. So people is moving from rural areas and moving to urban areas. So we have big cities with big slums, a huge population. We were talking about Jakarta, we were talking about China, and we are talking also about Belo Horizonte that has already around 3 million people living in urban areas. So it's a lot of people and a lot of new issues in public health. So just few lessons about infectious disease related to this globalization that I would like to share before we move to the Pfizer international partnerships. So, of course, infectious disease is always scary. So everybody is scared about Ebola. Everybody is scared about influenza. We were talking today about, during the visits to Eduardo de Menezes, about yellow fever, and we are talking about parasite disease in the afternoon at the CGP, João Paulo II. So infectious diseases are really scary. But they can also be a global health issue. I share with you here the first publication about HIV. So this is a publication from CDC, and you can see the date here, 1981. This happened when the HIV was discovered. So they described unusual syndrome in a specific population. And what we saw after that is the spread of the disease. This is in Brazil. This is when the HIV was discovered. And so we saw increase of number of cases. And of course, this is clear for us that HIV is a good, represents very well this global health issue, and it's not a problem from the United States, it's not a problem from Asia, it's a problem for the entire world. So in my area, we work also with superbugs, superbacteria, resistance, and we can see, and I always talk about KPC, I always talk about resistance, antibiotic resistance in bacteria. And what we can see is that bacteria can be transmitted from different hospitals, can be transmitted in different countries. And we have several studies showing the dissemination of resistance patterns between countries, between continents. And in our relation, this is the study in our hospital. It's a quite old study, but it's interesting to see how the periods or how the resistance increase in some kind of bacteria. And these bacteria, when the resistance is described, we have high mortality and it's very complicated to treat patients. So we can see here, for example, MRSA, we can see, for example, Klebsiella, E. coli, resistance to few antibiotics. And so this is a challenge not only for Brazil or for Belo Horizonte, but also for other countries. And we have an opportunity to talk a lot about mosquitoes in this meeting. Desiree will be here, Mike will be here, and we'll be talking also about arbovirus. And of course, mosquitoes and arbovirus disease, they are a global health issue too. It's not a problem in Brazil only, but in the countries around Brazil, in the South America, Central America, and abroad. So, and this is the result when we do not, and when we are not able to address these issues promptly or correctly. Okay, so basically based on that, I can tell you that when we started this project, we were thinking about address these global health issues and this infectious disease in collaboration with important universities that had a different background that we have here in Brazil. So then we started to this partnership with some institutions that work a lot with the same concepts or the same issues that we handle here in Brazil. So why, and this is a question that I would like to drive you to understand in the next slides. What are the benefits of establishing a strong international partnership in public health and medicine? So I believe, and we have been sharing this with the Pfizer directors, with the students, why internalization is so important. So we have here big contributions for our institution when we think about internalization program or having this program stronger every year. So we are thinking about diversification of student body, opportunities for student mobility. I'll be talking about this later. Opportunity for staff, for faculty, for professors' mobility, curriculum, improving our curriculum, improve our research collaboration, and assess new networks. So these are the main focus why we move in this direction. So we have public health issues, we have limitations of resource, we have limitations of people to work with this. So the idea would be working together with someone or with institutions that has a large experience in some of these issues. And of course, working hard and doing a great job in international programs, we can gain reputation, profile, and positioning as an educational institution, and also access new initiatives, funding opportunities. So this is a summary of why we believe and why we are so dedicated to improve international partnerships in Brazil. So this is basically our main idea for that. So everything started 10 years ago. I want to tell you in a few minutes how we did that or how we developed this partnership. And of course, Emory was the first institution, and that was related to my program, to my project at CDC. And that in 2009, I moved to Atlanta, and I was part of Pfizer as a faculty. And this was my first presentation at Emory University in 2008. So Juan is here, and I was presenting to an audience like this one, and in the School of Public Health, and we were sharing at that time a little bit about the public health issues in Minas Gerais. So we were talking about infectious disease, we were talking about primary care, limitations of healthcare support. So a lot of issues were raised on that discussion, and that, of course, was related to a very special interest for some professors, some faculty from Emory. And just to give you an idea, Emory is located in Atlanta. This is the Emory campus. It's a big institution. So we have a School of Medicine. Juan can talk a little bit about this later. But we have a medical campus, a School of Public Health. We have a children's hospital. So it's a big institution. Yeah, and so and we start to work together with the School of Public Health. So in 2008, I presented this lecture, and I finished my program at CDC, and then I came back to Brazil. And when I came back to Brazil, I brought the idea to the Pfizer directors. On that time, Asuero, before Dr. Ricardo here, was the president or was the director of Pfizer, together with Dr. Erica, that you know very well, Dr. João Lúcio, that was there at Pfizer on that time. And we brought the idea of international partnership with an institution called Emory. So, and then we start to move, and basically the design for that initial partnership was really having the students from Pfizer working together with us in a project, in a pilot project about diarrhea. We know very well that diarrhea is not the big issue in Brazil, but on that time was a very interesting investigation since we didn't have many information in Vespasiano. So you can see here Dr. João Lúcio, Dr. Erica, Dr. Asuero. This is Dr. Eric Mintz from CDC. He came to Brazil to work with us in this diarrhea project. This is the group of the students that work with us in the first project. So Otávio, Bernardo, Priscilla, this is Joanna and Priscilla. They were all Pfizer students like you. In 2009, they were working with us in the field. And Juan is here in 2009, walking through the neighborhoods in Vespasiano. So the project started this way. So we selected good students. They were very devoted to the project. We had a main issue to investigate that in that case was diarrhea in children under 5 years old. And then from that time, we start a very beautiful history, working together with many students every year. So we started then a very nice program where basically the students from Pfizer work together with international visitors for a specific project, and then after this project, the students from Pfizer can go to United States to do a medical rotation or a clinical rotation. And from the beginning, we start in that way. So you can see here different students. You can see connections with the public health system, and I'll show you in few slides. So we always try to get connected or try to answer issues or questions related to Vespasiano area. From the beginning, and we got close to the Secretary of Health. On that time, Dr. Erica was the secretary and supported us a lot. And in 2011, I will show you something that changed completely our history in this collaboration. So in 2011, we worked together with Juan and his group at Emory for 2 years. And then in 2011, we had a new chapter of this program when the pediatric department, representatives of the pediatric department of Emory came to Brazil. So we can see here Dr. Parmi Suchev. Dr. Parmi is a pediatrician. He's a nutritionist, or he works in nutrition for CDC. And he came to Brazil in order to establish Pfizer, or to visit Pfizer and maybe turn Pfizer into a reference center for pediatric training in South America. And he was very impressive for all connections that Pfizer had on that time. And this is a part of the project that we developed detecting anemia in children under 5 in Vespasiano, again, keeping moving this kind of projects. This is our visit. This is 2011, when we took the physicians, the pediatricians from Emory to go to CGP to visit the infectious disease unit. And after this effort or dedication in order to show them the possibilities for collaborations here, in 2011, you can see Pfizer turn it into one of the reference centers for pediatric training at Emory. So we are now one of the centers for the Global Health Organization of Pediatrics of Emory. So this was the first time that we visit CGP, the director, the former director. Parmi is here. I'm always there. But anyway, so this turned into another level. So we had on that time, 2011, remember we started in 2009, 2011, then we had the School of Medicine and the School of Public Health starting to work with us. And then we had our first agreement signed between Emory and Pfizer. This is exactly the day where we signed the agreement. We went to Fogo de Chão. It was a nice party, I can tell you. Yes, and then we signed the agreement there. And of course, this established a new chapter of this collaboration. So we were, in that moment, a reference center for pediatrics for Emory, and also we keep moving the projects with the Rollins School of Public Health. Well, from that time on, many visits from them to come to Brazil, and I and our group visiting them in Atlanta. You see a lot of meetings, a lot of people trying to get connected in the best strategies, in the best projects in order to bring good ideas and implement here in Brazil. And in 2012, and I'm moving to the end of this, in 2012, amazingly, we hosted a delegation of directors from Emory. They visit Pfizer. Juan was there at that time, and this was the provost of Emory. They came to Brazil, right, Juan, to visit institutions that had collaborations with Emory, and Pfizer was one of these institutions. So we have here important people, important directors from Emory that came to Brazil, came to our campus to understand what we were doing together here. So it's amazing. In 3 years, 2009, 10, 11, and 12, we had the opportunity to host the directors of Emory in Vespasiano. Well, of course, this is a result of a lot of effort on our field work and our projects. I will share some images about our projects. So I always focus on the population issues or healthcare and population problems in the healthcare, in the population-based attention. We can see here a lot of meetings between the international visitors with our students, working together with the physicians in the Vespasiano healthcare system. Of course, always you can see Dr. Erica here in the municipality administration. So after every project, we prepare a summary of the results to share with the Public Health Administration to see, to share about what were our findings about the projects. So, and then also we shared the results with the public health professionals. We always, we had this dedication in every project. So in 2016, the project moved to another direction. So we were working with diarrhea, we were working with nutrition, we were working with prenatal care. And in 2016, we moved to another direction when Dr. Jessica Farley, that is here, came and started to work with us in a project of related to Hansen's disease, leprosy. So we start to work together with Dr. Sandra Leon, and Dr. Sandra Leon is a Pfizer faculty. She's a professor in dermatology, and she's one of the reference for Hanseníasis or leprosy in Minas Gerais in Brazil. And also we established a very good collaboration with Secretaria Estadual de Saúde, or the state level of the administration for Hansen's disease. This is Dr. Cida Grossi, another Pfizer faculty. So we had all the environmental to move this project forward. So we have at Pfizer key professors, key faculty that work very hard in this field. We had international institution interested in investigate or help us to answer some questions about Hansen's disease. And of course, we had the students, we had people involved on that. So these are the photos that the project, since we move a little bit, we work in Eduardo de Menezes, and then we move the project to Governador Valadares, and we are working together with Universidade Federal de Juiz de Fora in Governador Valadares. You can see here 2 Emory students that came to work with us in 2017, I think so, 2017. Yeah, okay. So when you see a lot of people involved with that, this is important for you to understand, especially the students. You are the reason for the success of this partnership. So I'm always working here, but you see a lot of new faces every year. So we renew the people, and this year we have the project again, and probably we'll need more help of you. So keep aware about these opportunities, because it's unique and very precious for your medical formation or for your medical background. Here's another interesting photos when we visit past year Colônia Santa Isabel. So the project is really moving more and more to the public health field. We are working with CDC in a new innovation multiplex platform that will be testing in different areas of this project. So innovation now is coming very strong in our partnerships too. So, and finally, about Emory, and then we move to Stanford and University of Miami. They are very, they will be very quick in terms of information. But you can see here the clinical rotation experience that we built with Emory. This is Dr. Linda, is a pediatrician, is a pediatric resident. And they are usually coming to Brazil and doing some clinical rotation in big hospitals like Hospital da Baleia. They have been doing some work in the primary care. We have here Carol. Carol will be tomorrow with us at the breakfast in the morning. So Carol was part of she's a Pfizer student, and she worked with Linda, and she just came back from Emory. So she spent 4 weeks there in an observership program. So this is a kind of exchange program that we want to improve. We want to expand in the next years. So, of course, we cannot forget the scientific contributions. So these are the papers that we publish related to the project. So you can see papers about Hansen's disease, about prenatal care, about Hansen's disease again, about family health strategy, and the students are part of these papers. You see here Joanna, you see here Priscilla. So one of the benefits to be part of this project is really having the student publishing their data or their work in international journals, and we have been dedicating a lot of efforts to this. And also helping partnered institutions in Brazil. This is the residents that came and visit us. Mike was part of this, presenting a lecture at Hospital da Baleia, so helping these institutions also to move into the direction of international partnerships. And finally, I want to talk about Stanford. So Stanford is pretty new in terms of our timeline. So we are talking here about 10 years of partnerships, but of course, Stanford is a unique a partner institution because it's a very prestigious institution, as Emory is, but we are very interested to investigate the best ways to move forward the research and collaboration and exchange programs with Stanford. So Stanford is located in California, so we moved from east to west side of United States, and in 2014, was the first time that we met people from Stanford in order to start this partnership. This is Dr. Michelle Berry that was expected to be here. Unfortunately, she could not come to Brazil right now. But in 2014, Dr. Bonnie Maldonado and Dr. Michelle, we discussed about the possibility to reproduce something similar of what we did with Emory, with Stanford. And was amazing on that time because Stanford, Dr. Michelle is the director of Innovation and Global Health Initiative at Stanford. And so we could share some scientific and research information with her, and she was very impressed and interested to move to work with Pfizer. And then they recommended us to get in contact with Dr. Desiree that's here tonight. And Desiree came to the game and started to work with us in 2017. We launched the first project in arbovirus infection. So we started to work together, and this project was very interesting because we worked together. Was the first time that Pfizer, Stanford, and Emory worked together in Brazil. So we had a resident from Emory that worked with us. We have Michael Maurer, the first resident part of this project, coming to Brazil. Desiree came to Brazil, and we had a collaboration with Hospital de Lombares on that time because it was the main center to see arbovirus infections, dengue, Zika, chikungunya. That was good for us because we didn't have so many cases, but was too bad for the research. But anyway, was good for public health that we had a decrease in the numbers of arbovirus in the both years that in the 2 years that we tried to initiate this investigation. But you can see here our meetings at Hospital de Lombares. You can see familiar faces here. All right, so students from Pfizer again. So Julia is there, all right? So students from Pfizer always being an important part of this partnership. So, and then some field work not related to this project, but some field work also in another different projects that run in parallel in this partnership. And these were the meetings, always trying to get connected with people that are trying to answer questions as we are. So we spent time to go to FMG, we went to Fiocruz, share our partnership and our skills with researchers in one of the in these two main research institutions in Minas Gerais, and we have been established collaborations with them too. We just submitted a grant together with FMG about arbovirus, and so these are the results for this partnership. And last but not least, we have here international presentations of our data. This is Michael and Desiree presenting in the international conference the results we found here in our research. So this is basically the timeline or the steps that we are we are following in order to grow, in order to make these collaborations stronger. And finally, I want to share with you a very special moment for me, and of course for Mike is here. We are announcing a new partnership with University of Miami. So Michael Maurer was the first resident from Stanford that came to Brazil in 2017. You saw in my slides. And now Mike moved to University of Miami, and from what he saw here and all the enthusiasm of the students, the dedication of Pfizer, Michael decided to bring University of Miami or represent Pfizer at University of Miami, and now Mike is here to share a possibility for us to establish a collaboration also in Florida. So this is University of Miami, and some information here, just general information, but we are talking again about a very, very prestigious institution in North America. And this is the next step that we are moving now in our international program at Pfizer. So basically, we'll be working the next years with Emory University, University of Miami, and Stanford University in order to creating a new challenge ahead of us. So if we think about what we did, and I share a few images and information with you, at the end, or looking back, we have more than 50 faculty, students, researchers involved in this project, and we have hundreds of another people indirectly involved in the project. We have more than 15, I think we are, with Carol, we have 16 students that came from, students from Pfizer that came to Emory to do observership program. We are improving medical education through these partnerships. This is important. We are addressing relevant healthcare issues for Minas Gerais state. We have been getting close and close to our partners, not only in Brazil, but of course, these international partners. We are now working very hard on establishing a very a state-of-art public health center for investigation. I will tell you the next slide. And we have been working now to promote a self-sustainable project. So working together with our collaborators and apply for grants in the United States and Brazil. So finally, I want to share the next steps. So what we have ahead of us. So we are celebrating 10 years, but in fact, we are looking to the next 10 years, what we will be or where we'll be in the next 10 years. So tomorrow we will have a very special moment for Pfizer, where we'll have the creation, or at least the launch of the idea for the Institute of Innovation and Biomedical Research. You'll be familiar with this concept very soon. So we want to expand and get it stronger, or get the international exchange programs stronger at Pfizer. So we want to improve the programs, having more students going back and forth, and we want to send residents in our partners, of our partners. We want to send faculty, professors to go to United States too. So this is what we are looking for in the future. Educational programs, this is a key strategy for the next 10 years. So developing web-based teleconference, training course, master degree, PhD programs. So we need to think high about this partnership, because our partners are very important and they have these big skills in this area. Improve research programs at Pfizer, of course. Search for funding opportunities, and of course, innovation and looking for innovation and new projects in public health. So these are general concepts of what we are thinking for the next 10 years, looking ahead and see what we will improve and what we learned from the past 10 years and what we will apply for the next 10 years. So, and finally, this is my last slide. This is a thought that I wrote when I was thinking about this partnership. So I believe that when we work together with public administration, we are talking about public health service, with private companies and with universities or educational centers, we can work together and push and move to the borders of, or to the frontiers of knowledge. They become a powerful engineer, this collaboration for innovation and economical growth. So I believe these partnerships can bring this to Pfizer, can bring this to our connections, to bring this to our environmental. So please I want to thank you all for this special moment. I'm really happy to be here. And I want to thank you, Pfizer Board of Directors, Dr. Ricardo Guimarães representing the directors, the SESUVI is the maintenance of Pfizer, Pfizer faculty, students, you are the reason for this, believe in me. Nothing of this was possible without you guys. We have been working hard with Secretary Vespasiano, Secretary of Health, Brazilian partners. We are talking here about UFMG, we are talking here about the hospitals, Hospital da Baleia, Eduardo de Menezes, CGP, we are talking here about Odilon Bearings. So a very strong network that we established together with the international institutions. And of course, I want to say thanks to the Emory University, Juan, Jessica, say thanks to Parmi and all colleagues over there. Say thanks, Desiree, to Michelle. I know she could not be here, but it would be an honor for us. But thanks so much for your efforts and dedication to this project. And thanks, Mike, to believe in Pfizer and believe in what we are doing here. So we are very happy to have you and University of Miami working with us. So, and this is the result for this. The international program was an important part for this grade 5 of Pfizer. So, and we want to contribute more and more for the strength of Pfizer to improve our programs, educational extension and research program, and of course, looking forward for the next 10 years. Thanks so much. All right, so let's move forward. And as I commented before, we don't have Dr. In the original program, we had Dr. Michelle Berry would be speaking now. But then we made some arrangements here, and I invited Dr. Juan Leon to open our conference. And Dr. Juan, please help me to welcome Dr. Juan Leon. And he'll be speaking about on becoming a global citizen, transformative learning through global health experience. Thanks so much, Dr. Juan. Thanks so much.
I wanted to say a big thank you to Dr. Ricardo and all the participants who are here. It's going to be a lot of fun to get to meet some of you, to get to work with some of you, and to share some of the information and knowledge that I will be discussing with you today. So I'll be discussing on becoming a global citizen, transformative learning through global health experiences. To give you a taste, if you wanted to do global health here at Pfizer or at your institution, how you would go about in starting to think about this. So as a place to start, how many of you, if you could just raise your hand, have either lived, studied, collaborated outside of Brazil? Just a show of hands. So if you look around, it's about half of you who have done this. So there's already a lot of experience in working outside of the United States in many of these different projects. So one of the things I would like you to think about during this presentation are two things. Please think about whether global health experiences are important in your classes, in curriculum, and if you're a teacher in your students. And if the answer is yes, what would be some of the next steps for you at the different levels? So as a place to start, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a global citizen. So I'll tell you a little bit about my life journey. So I was born in the country of Peru, and I come from a large family, maybe similar to some of your large families as well. And after Peru, I left Peru at age of 2 to the country of Dominican Republic. And Dominican Republic is a beautiful Caribbean island. If you go there, you'll see some beautiful beaches. But you will also, unfortunately, see some hurricanes. So in 1979, I still remember the Hurricane David that came, destroyed many of the parks nearby, and took away my Goofy. I remember like the water taking away my stuffed animal with the hurricanes. So these are some of the small instances of the different natural climate disasters that you hear about affecting your own life as well. From the country of the Dominican Republic, we moved to the country of Haiti, right next door. Again, a really beautiful country. I lived there under the reign of Baby Doc, which was a dictator. And my childhood was quite nice, but there was a lot of poverty there that I first experienced for the very first time. And the dictator had a group of almost like secret service policemen that they called totomakus that kept the population under a lot of fear and a lot of disappearances to make sure that his wishes were maintained. So that was my first realization that there was beauty with a lot of evil and ugliness all together combined in the country of Haiti. So after Haiti, we moved to the beautiful country of Brazil, and we lived in the city of Brasilia under the president of José Sarney. I learned Portuguese, and Portuguese was also helped by reading the gibis from Cascão and Mônica. I also learned about hyperinflation during those times. So for example, if I wanted to buy this delicious ice cream cone, it would cost me 10 cruzeiros the first day, 15 cruzeiros the next day, 20 cruzeiros the day afterwards. So it was a time that money did not mean anything when I lived in Brazil. There was a lot of time of protectionism and nationalism during this time as well. From Brazil, we moved to the country of Bolivia that fights for its rights. 80% of the population is indigenous from native ancestry, and so there's a lot of human rights that are celebrated there. From Bolivia, we went to the States for university, and so I studied at Dartmouth. It was very cold, so then I went to Chicago afterwards to study my PhD there, and studied Chagas disease in a mouse model of Chagas. It was still very cold in Chicago, so then I moved south to Atlanta, where it's very warm and much happier there. And in Atlanta, I'm in the Department of Global Health. So we do a lot of work in learning, research, and service within global health. So that was some of my perspectives in becoming a global citizen, and I wanted to start sharing some of that with some of our students at Emory and beyond as well. So myself and Dr. Jessica Fairley, that you'll hear, do a lot of this training and teaching in global health. And one of the things that we wanted to share with you is why global health training? Why is it so important for many of us to engage in global health training? And one of the main reasons is that in this world, we have so many different changes in health, and we need to be able to respond to the complexity of emerging and re-emerging diseases. So for example, here's a timeline from Zika from the 1940s all the way to the present, and how it spread throughout all these different countries through many different social contextual determinants of health along the way as well. And when you think about global health, you think, how do I start? What are some of the things that I need to start thinking about in terms of global health? Fortunately, last year, the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health published a list of 6 competencies that all programs must think about. So if you wanted to do global health here in Brazil at your institution, you may want to start thinking about including some of these competencies in your training and in your education as well. For example, the organizations in global health, ethics in global health, and for example, Dr. Jessica Fairley will speak more about the ethics in global health. Maybe also monitoring and evaluation in global health. How do you think about evidence-based multi-sectoral interventions? And you'll hear some work from Dr. Michael Maurer and Dr. Lavery on this as well. Also some of the social determinants of health. So Dr. Lebaud would also speak to this. Also talking about workforce development. How do we make sure that there's enough nurses, doctors, accountants, everybody that's important in global health. And very importantly, self-reflection. Thinking very carefully about what is your place, what is your power, why you're here, what is your motivation, and how does that affect your relationships with other people. Humility in the culture that you bring and the culture that you work with, and also to always be learning in global health. So these are some of the key competencies that we try to instill in our students, and if you're interested here in Pfizer to do so, I encourage you to think about this at the same time. So the next question is, how do we start actually doing some of these competencies in global health? So some of our global health leaders say that if you wanted to train in global health, you need to do experiential learning. So you need to do global health in order to learn about global health. And so how do you start doing that, for example? So you can do that through coursework, And some of the work is that you can do some case-based studies or problem-based studies, because our world is full of problems and we need to think about innovative solutions to solve them. Or think about solution-based learning as well. Think about the solutions and think about how to make them better as well. You may think about practica. So when you do different practical experiences, maybe go and work in global health settings as well, whether inside of Brazil or outside of Brazil. And maybe you want to think about a culminating experience. That is your experience at the very end of your career, whether that's your thesis, your coursework, et cetera. How do you integrate all that good knowledge that you have learned and apply the global health framework to this ultimately? So to give you some examples, if you were to do, for example, case studies as part of your coursework, you could include a small case study about some situation that happened. In this case, we use a nutrition case study to think about cultural humility in a setting in Atlanta by applying a program from Europe and how that would work. So similarly, you could apply similar case studies in some of your medical education and curriculum as you think about global health. You may also want to think about the delivery mechanisms. Do you want to do it in person? Do you want to do it virtually and online? So for example, last year we started a pilot program in which we did one of our introductory global health courses that Emory students work in, and we partnered with some Pfizer students. So we partnered up with Lara Secchi, Eduarda Berniz, Gabriela Boller also. Of course, they did not dress so beautifully when they were in our class, but they gave to us their big brains and their experience in helping to develop new projects with Emory students focusing on the reality here in Minas Gerais and in Vespasiano as well. And we also had the collaboration of Ana Carolina Nunes, who came to Emory and helped develop a training for our students on the SUS, which was very important for our students as well. And so in a lot of this, we did different technologies so that Gabriela and Lara could see our Emory students and they could work together on the different projects all at the same time. So the next thing is you may want to think about, if I wanted to actually do a global health, how would I do it if I wanted to actually do it myself and live it and feel it? So you could do internships, on-site research, rotations, exchange programs, or in your coursework where you connect directly with the community is some ways that you could do that as well. As Dr. Ferreira has described, we have exchanged many different students over the years over different projects, including MPH, PhD, physician assistant students as well, and visits back to Emory as well. And when you think about global health, do you want to think about it domestically? So for example, within Brazil, or do you want to think about global health outside of Brazil? And before I answer that question, I wanted to share with you a quote about defining global health from a very esteemed professor, Dr. Jeff Copeland, who published in The Lancet in 2009 and based at Emory University. But some of the key themes that Dr. Copeland emphasized was equity, transnational health issues, so it has to cross borders in some capacity or other, interdisciplinary collaboration, and population-based prevention or clinical care as well. So he had a very nice table comparing the different kinds of health to each other: global health, international health, and public health. So again, the key item here is transcending national boundaries, just as the definition from Dr. Ferreira, Institute of Medicine, also crossing national boundaries is very important for thinking about global health. So when you think about global health and public health, you can think about global health being this circle and public health being this circle. And there are areas of overlap and also areas of difference between the two. So for example, when you think about public health may be just regional. So it could be a health promotion program in a specific region, like Rio de Janeiro, for example, but that has no transnational ramifications. Or you can think about global health that has no public health, such as taking clinical care related to leishmaniasis, for example, in another country, or maybe basic science related to tropical diseases, understanding the different proteins and genes that occur. So that's global health without public health. But now if you integrate the two together, then you can think about maybe adapting the vaccination campaigns that have been very successful in Belo Horizonte to Mendoza, Argentina for dengue, for example. So that's an example of global health, taking a project from one situation, transcending national boundaries, and applying it into a new situation as well. Now, the answer to the question is, do you have to leave Brazil in order to do that? The answer is no. You could be in Brazil and do global health. So the important thing is transcending national boundaries. So you could work with populations from other countries that come into Brazil, and that is global health. You could work on different diseases that have started in Brazil and spread to other regions or come from other regions and come to Brazil, like obesity, for example. That is global health as well. And we have this new term called global is local, local is global, or glocal. So basically, glocal is global health, and you can do glocal here in Brazil or outside of Brazil. You don't have to leave Vespasiano or Belo Horizonte to do global health. So when you think about these out-of-classroom global health experiences, we wanted to share how we did this at Emory, if you wanted to use as an example for how to do it here as well. So the main issue for our students is we wanted to make sure that they had funding to do these kinds of experiences when they traveled. And so we had two pockets of funding that we gave to our students. One is the Global Institute Field Scholars, and the other one is the Global Field Experience that we gave students to be able to do. And these are based on endowments, so like doações that different people set up. So first, we started in 1996 with the first gift, and then every single year, more people added to this very small seed, and this pocket of money grew and grew and grew. And even the students got involved. They would bring in gifts from all the countries that they lived in, and they would raise money, or they would do different activities and events to raise money for this pocket of money that would grow and grow. And from this pocket of money, from the interest from the stock market, then they could start funding these specific internships and programs for students to go to other countries or to work in Atlanta or to work in other parts of the United States as well. So for example, EGHI wants people to be multidisciplinary, so they require 3 schools at Emory, law, for example, medicine, and public health to work together as part of a team, and they gave $3,000 for each student to go either within the United States or abroad to do this work. Jiffy, for example, focused on just one school, School of Public Health, sends 30 students each year. They give $1,500 to go abroad as well. And this is just a part, because sometimes your plane ticket just costs this amount if you wanted to go to the African continent. And so then students themselves would get other sources of money to also do this work. So in closing, I wanted to talk a little bit about some lessons learned that we have from these different experiences in doing global health. One, both partners have to win. So if you go abroad or if you work with your partner here in Belo Horizonte or Vespasiano, you have to win from this experience and your partner has to win from this experience. So this means you have a very deep conversation at the beginning to say, what are your interests, what are my interests, and how can we meet halfway so that we both win is important. Secondly, and something that we're starting to do more and more in global health is reflexão. You need to do a lot of reflexivity yourself and your partners. You have to think about your own motivations. What are you getting from this experience? Sometimes you get more from the experience than the other person that you're working with. So what is the motivation that you're getting? Also, you have to think about your power. So if you come to a new setting and you're coming with a lot of resources and money, you have more power than that other setting. So it doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you're bringing more resources and money, but you have to understand your power dynamics and how that affects the people that you're working with and your partners as well. The relationships that you bring to role. What is your role in the project? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a researcher? Are you going to be an activist? And can you mix those roles with each other? The answer is not really, because then it gets too messy and confusing. So decide, do you want to be a researcher? Do you want to be a doctor? Or do you want to be an activist? And stay within your role and shift as you need to shift, but be very clear in those expectations. Think about your assumptions and the needs of your partner population. Another important thought that we're starting to explore at Emory is compassion. And this is not just compassion to other people, which means not only empathy, but also action together, but you must also be compassionate to yourself. Before you take care of others, you need to take care of yourself first. So how can you make sure that your needs are taken care of, that you sleep, that you eat, that when bad things happen, you have good emotional support? Because as you're engaging in these different activities, you're going to see a lot of pain and suffering. And in your work, you see a lot of pain and suffering already. So how are you protecting yourself first before you protect those around you as well? So compassion to self and others. And ultimately, both partners have to be engaged. Make sure that when somebody says something, you immediately write it down so that you have a record of what has been said and what you have agreed on for the future. And as Dr. Ferreira says, whatever you produce, make sure to give it back so that everybody benefits ultimately from these activities. So those are some of our experiences, some of our lessons learned that I encourage you to think about as you think about doing global health within the Pfizer experience. So I'd like to say thank you to all of us. Here are some pictures from our nice dinner to get to meet many of the people here at Pfizer as well. So thank you, everybody. Please, and your name? João, okay. We'll call you João. Okay. So João, you'll be recorded for all of time, and your word will be spread across the world.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so my question is, this compassion practice to the others and by ourselves, is there some more, a way that people are doing that, like mindfulness or something like that?
Yeah, so João's question was about compassion. How do you start this work? So we have a professor called David Ades who does a lot of work in many countries, and he's starting a movement called Compassion in Global Health. He has a nice website, so you can look up Compassion in Global Health in Google, and there's a lot of different resources. You can also look up compassion at Emory University, and there's a lot of training. So depending on your spiritual belief or your philosophy, there's many ways that you can think about compassion. So you can think about compassion from a spirituality point of view. You can think about compassion from a philosophy point of view. You can think about it through meditation as well. But there's different practices that you start thinking about connecting yourself by understanding the suffering of others is one step. And the second step is, how do you then move to action? But you can only move to action in taking care of the suffering of others once you have taken care of the suffering of yourself first. So once you are strong within, you can go around and taking care of the suffering of others. So that's the very short message of a very long practice.
Thank you.
More questions?
Okay.
All right, so let's go to the next presentation. I want to invite Dr. Desiree Lebeau. Dr. Lebeau will be speaking tonight about the ocular manifestations of emerging arbovirus. Piece of a puzzle. Very exciting. Oh my. So, welcome. Please help me welcome Dr. Desiree.
Good evening. So again, I want to echo what Juan just said. I'm very thankful to be here. I appreciate so much Dr. Ricardo and all of Pfizer, Jose. Your continued determination to get Stanford and Pfizer connected is also, I share that with you, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very sorry that Michelle couldn't be here. So we were just talking in generalities. Now we're going to go very specific to certain manifestations of certain diseases. So Jose wanted me to talk about arboviruses and ocular disease. And I'll just start briefly just by saying why I know anything about this. When I was a pediatric infectious disease physician, when I was in my fellowship, I started working on something called Rift Valley fever virus. And I don't know how many of you know about that virus. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but it has a lot of ocular manifestations. So I became interested early on in sort of the eye complications from these viruses. And so that's what I'm going to share with you today briefly. So first I'll give you just a little bit of background on arboviral disease in the eye, and then I'll specifically go through some of the most common arboviruses and what the manifestations are in the eye. And I'll end talking about Rift Valley fever and a tiny little research project we did looking at ocular pathogenesis in Rift. So I don't know how many of you know this, but eye complications in arboviruses are actually quite common. Because these viruses are so neurotropic, they love to go to the brain. And as you all know, the eye is just an outpouching of the brain, right? So it makes sense that these infections would also target the eye and cause complications in the eye. You'll see as I go through this presentation that all different parts of the eye can be involved. The anterior chamber, the cornea itself, the posterior chamber, the vitreous, and particularly the retina in some of these cases, and the choroid can be involved. And of course, now with Zika and the fact that there's congenital arboviral disease. Of course, the babies who get Zika virus infection in utero can also have ocular complications. And we're learning more and more about that as we start to understand the full spectrum of disease from Zika. So this is a big chart, but I just want to show you some of the most common infections, the ones I'm going to talk about today, and the fact that they can cause all sorts of eye diseases. So as you all know, Zika in particular causes conjunctivitis, right? That's one of like the classic signs for Zika. It's very common in Zika. It happens a little bit with some of the others as well. Of course, dengue causes bleeding, so it makes sense that you'd have conjunctival petechia with dengue. You can get anterior uveitis. That's actually one of the most common eye findings with chikungunya. I'll talk about that. Uveitis can be common. You can see chorioretinitis is quite common with West Nile infection. You can have maculopathy with these infections. And then, of course, it can infect and affect the optic nerve, causing neuropathy. You can have palsies, and then congenital involvement, particularly with Zika, but also a little bit with West Nile as well. Yellow fever can cause conjunctivitis rarely, but usually does not cause any intraocular manifestations, although the vaccine has been shown to have some chorioretinitis, and I'll talk about that. And then I just wanted to show you Rift. Remember I mentioned that Rift is really known for its ocular manifestations, and I made my own little chart here with Rift. But as you can see, Rift does almost everything, and so we'll talk about that. So first, dengue. You all know dengue, right? The most common arboviral infection in the world. Some people have no symptoms, but when you do have symptoms, they can be mild, but they can also be severe, of course. Breakbone fever is common when you initially get dengue. Oftentimes you have this retroorbital headache. And the eye complications, about 50% of patients with dengue can have little petechia on their conjunctiva, right? And that's regardless of platelet count. And less commonly, about 8% of cases can have other eye findings, including maculopathy and then anterior and posterior inflammation. So there was a study done in Singapore where they looked at about 200 adult patients with severe dengue. 16 of them had maculopathy, and all but one had significant visual impairment with that maculopathy. This particular outbreak happened to be associated with dengue type 1, and people believe that maybe dengue type 1 is a little bit more likely to cause eye manifestations. Most of the time it was bilateral, and usually people recovered, okay? As you'll see when I go through this talk, no one really knows exactly how to best treat these complications of eye disease. Sometimes steroids, sometimes it's controversial, and so forth. And you'll see that on the slides. Lesions, again, appear about 8 days after fever, suggesting an immune mechanism. And again, the way that the patients would present is, of course, they have blurry vision, they can't see, or they're complaining of eye pain. And as you can see here, maybe it's difficult for you to see, but there's yellow spots and there's some hemorrhage here in this macula. Here's some more pictures of classic hemorrhagic vasculitis with dengue, with a hemorrhage in the different forms of uveitis here. So overall, again, anterior compartment uveitis is quite mild and less common, but it can occur, and it usually occurs 1 week to 4 to 5 months after infection. So one of the points that I'm going to make to you today, and you'll see this as I go through, is that some of these ocular complications happen within the week or about a week after your disease, but some happen very late. And so it's important to be vigilant when you're following up these patients and to make sure that they're not suffering any of these complications later on. Again, the most common sign is decreased visual acuity, and again, good prognosis. And no one knows whether or not steroids are useful. So on to chikungunya. You all know chikungunya looks a lot like dengue, but sometimes people have more arthritis, more arthralgias, and of course the joint involvement can persist for days, weeks, months, and lead to problems sometimes for years in those affected. Ocular complications are not that common, but can occur. And the most common one is actually anterior uveitis. And about when there are eye complications of chikungunya, about 1/3 of them are due to anterior uveitis. Again, signs appear within 4 to 12 weeks after the start of the disease. It can be unilateral, bilateral, and it usually responds well to steroids. Complete resolution usually occurs after steroid treatment within about 3 days. And so just here's some anterior uveitis pictures with chikungunya. Posterior uveitis, such as retinitis or chorioretinitis, can also happen, but it's more rare. Neuroretinitis can actually have exudative hemorrhagic lesions, and that can lead to some macular edema. And some cases have been treated with NSAIDs, some steroids, some people recur, others don't. People don't know what the best treatments are. Optic neuropathy can also happen with CHIK, about 10% of ocular involvement of CHIK disease, so less common than anterior uveitis, but it's still quite common when you look at the ocular manifestations. Signs usually appear about a month after the start of the disease, and again, people present with decreased visual acuity. And these patients were treated with IV steroids, which was more helpful early on. Interestingly, chikungunya, the virus itself, has also been found in the cornea. We're not sure in the joint manifestations of CHIK where the virus hides out and why some people have problems and complications for years after initial disease, but it has been documented to have been found in the cornea during the viremic phase, and so those with chikungunya are excluded from corneal donation during that acute phase, of course. Other ocular manifestations can happen: keratitis, scleritis, epiluscleritis, and oculomotor palsies, as seen in this picture where this patient could not adduct the right eye. As for Zika, we're just learning about Zika. We all are, all across the world, right? But ocular involvement, can it be acquired in the acute phase of the disease? And it can also present, of course, in the neonate who is infected in utero. And these are some pictures, again, of hemorrhage and optic atrophy with a congenitally acquired case of congenital Zika virus infection. You all know that Zika presents often with a non-purulent conjunctivitis in the acute phase. This is the most frequent ocular finding, but sometimes you can have intraocular inflammation. Usually happens at about a week after disease onset and can respond well to steroids. Usually prognosis is good. Maculopathy has also been described. The first signs of congenital ocular involvement, of course, occurred here in Brazil with the large Zika outbreak that happened here. The presence of complications was found particularly in microcephalic newborns, right? 34% of which also had ocular abnormalities. Most of the time, the lesions consisted of chorioretinal pigmentation or atrophy, and oftentimes were bilateral. No uveitis, and there were some disc changes. And of course, the earlier on in pregnancy the infection happened, the more likely these ocular manifestations were to occur in these babies. Chorioretinitis or atrophic lesions have also been observed in non-microcephalic children. So again, the spectrum of Zika is wide. We don't fully understand it yet, and so we have to be very diligent when looking at these children. And so we need to screen for ocular lesions in all children born to a mom infected during pregnancy, and repeat those exams yearly. And again, we're not sure what the pathogenesis is. Is this actually direct infection of the eye? Is it direct viral pathogenesis, or is it an autoimmune or immune type phenomenon? And it's difficult because, again, with the timing, the ones that happen 5 months after initial infection, that seems very autoimmune or immune generated. But the ones, that happen about a week into disease, that could be direct viral injury as well. So West Nile is the most common arbovirus in the United States. It's widely distributed across the world. Our biggest outbreak happened in 2002. And again, most humans, like dengue or Zika, have subclinical infections, or you have a mild febrile illness. But West Nile definitely leads to chorioretinitis, and it's the most common finding with West Nile ocular manifestations, occurring in almost 80% of patients with acute West Nile who have meningitis along with their West Nile. Again, decreased visual acuity can be variable, but is often a presenting symptom, and diabetes is a risk factor for this ocular complication. You could also have chorioretinal scars in babies who had congenital West Nile virus infection, and optic neuropathies and optic atrophies. And so that looks a lot like congenital Zika virus in the eye. Here's some pictures. Unfortunately, these are black and white, but there's these yellow exudates all along the back of the eye that often, look a lot like CMV or toxo, other things that cause chorioretinitis. Now for yellow fever. I mentioned to you, yellow fever on its own does not cause disease, but the vaccine has been associated with intraocular manifestations. You can get a little bit of conjunctivitis with yellow fever, but it's pretty rare. But following vaccination, people have seen optic neuropathy, this evanescent white dot syndrome. Dr. Ricardo, have you ever seen evanescent white dot syndrome? I have not. I don't know. Multifocal choroiditis, and then arterial occlusion. So in all cases, a vaccine was administered with other vaccines, so they're not quite sure that it was really the yellow fever vaccine, but it's been targeted as the cause. And signs appeared 1 to 3 weeks after vaccination and usually improved after about 2 months. And here's some, again, pictures of chorioretinal lesions. So what about Rift? So how many of you have heard of Rift? I just wonder. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So Rift Valley fever virus is another mosquito-borne virus, but the reason it's not here in Brazil, right? It's mainly limited to the African continent, although it has, in 2000, gone into the Middle East and Yemen and Saudi Arabia. So this infection is interesting because it's spread by mosquitoes, but you can also get it directly from handling infected animals, and it's a zoonosis. So Rift can infect pretty much any mammalian species and make them very sick with viremias, especially young animals. So in the places, I've been working in Kenya since 2003. In the places where Rift is really common, it's usually semi-arid, dry areas, and people are semi-nomadic pastoralists and are very closely related with their animal species. And so they oftentimes during outbreaks, the animals get sick first, and the animals all start to die, all the baby animals die, and all the pregnant animals start aborting. And that's usually the sign that there's a Rift outbreak going on. And those aborted tissues and those sick baby animals have just tons and tons of virus, so people can get infected just by handling those sick animals. For humans, most of the time, people get a self-limited febrile illness, luckily, but there are severe cases, and in those severe cases, they can look a lot like dengue with a lot of hemorrhage. It's a classic viral hemorrhagic fever. You can also have meningitis with it, up to about 8% of the time, and then very common eye infections. So about a third of people with Rift can have anterior uveitis, so painful red eyes and blurry vision. This is usually reversible. And then up to 20% can have retinitis, right? And so wherever those scars form on the back of the eye, if it's in your fovea, then you can go blind from your Rift. So again, ocular involvement usually happens about 4 to 15 days after infection. Retinitis is the most common, and permanent vision loss, unfortunately, is quite common. Ocular complications have been documented not just in humans, but also in animal species too, in sheep and in calves. And viral particles have been found in the eyes of these sick animals. So again, it's that question of is it the direct virus or is it autoimmune? So we were interested in sort of the pathogenesis of this because, as you can see, no one really knows why these eye complications happen. And so we know that humans, all of us in this room, actually can have anti-retinal antibodies, even without any kind of retinal disease in our eyes or any kind of Rift Valley fever exposure. But the eye is an immune privileged site, right? And usually the eye, there's a tolerization of ocular antigens. So it's a special place where the immune system does not like to target, right? The eye or the brain for that matter. So I'm just gonna spend a couple minutes just talking to you about a brief little study we did to determine whether Rift retinitis was associated with increased anti-retinal antibodies, suggesting maybe an autoimmune sort of pathogenesis for this ocular manifestation. So I had been working in Kenya with lots of wonderful Kenyans for many years, and we had many studies, and we decided to use 2 study groups, one collected in 2009 from Northeast Province and one in 2011. And as a part of all of our arboviral studies in Kenya, we always collect information on eye diseases. Even now when we're studying dengue and chikungunya in children, I get an eye exam on every single child we see. But then we had an ophthalmologist came out with us and did dilated retinal exams on our folks. And we found that there was a lot of eye disease caused by Rift. And so what we did was we wanted to screen for Rift Valley fever exposure by ELISA. So we screened our populations to see if they had been exposed to the virus, okay? And then we grouped them into 4 categories. We had those who had exposure to Rift and had retinitis, documented by the ophthalmologist. We had those who had Rift Valley fever exposure but did not have retinitis. And then we had those who didn't have Rift but had retinitis from another cause, okay? There are a lot of other infections that can cause retinitis. And then we had those that were double negative, so never saw Rift and didn't have retinitis. And we wanted to screen them to see, was there a difference in anti-retinal antibodies between the groups? So we took human eye tissue, we sectioned it, and then we put on the human serum to see if there were anti-retinal antibodies present in our patient's serum that would attach to the eyes. And then we immunohistostained these eye slides to see if we could see precipitate telling us that there was anti-retinal antibodies. And so this is, what it would look like, this brown color, if there was actually staining in the retina. Slides were scored by 2 masked observers. I was one of them, and we gave them a 0 to a 4 score. So we didn't have that many samples, but we did test about 50 samples or so, and about 21% of them actually had a positive score. And I'll just show you that those with rift and retinitis tended to have more anti-retinal antibodies, but it was a small study and we didn't reach statistical significance, okay? So if you look at it this way, the proportion, this dark bar here, of those with anti-retinal antibodies in rift retinitis were higher than the other groups, but of course it wasn't everyone, okay? So, of course, this is a very small study. It was just a little tiny study we did to try to see if, there was maybe an association kind of cluing in that there might be some autoimmune disease. And clearly, we had broad inclusion criteria, and unfortunately, we couldn't, of course, look at any uvea because we were only looking at retina, and the uvea is naturally pigmented. So, there was some other evidence that supported autoimmune role in rift pathogenesis in sheep and molecular mimicry studies, but really, in order to really fully understand this, what we really need is truly pathology, right? I talked to a lot of my friends at CDC who actually have samples from people from outbreaks of rift, and if they could actually section the eyes of those who succumb from rift, we would learn a lot more about these diseases. And so that's ongoing. So this was just the first little study to investigate pathogenesis, and they were inconclusive, but again, maybe antiretinoids, it's something further to look at. So these are just some of the people who helped perform that work. I just like to call it Samuel, who's my main collaborator in Kenya on the rift work. And I wanted to conclude this little talk on eye disease. So as you can see, arboviral infections really lead to a wide variety of ocular complications. Maybe that's new knowledge for you. You can see that the disease happens at all these different time points, sometimes a week after, sometimes 5 months after. So we really have to be vigilant about screening people and following them up so that we definitely diagnose these infections and then treat them appropriately. We need a lot more research to tell us what the appropriate treatments are and what the pathogenesis of these diseases are so that we can guide our therapies. Thank you.
Hello? Today during the lunch, we were talking about Ebola eye manifestations, and Jessica was sharing some information about she saw on Emory patients. Can you share a little bit about Ebola? Ebola was not there, so it's just curious about.
Yeah, it's more I've just seen presentations of colleagues, but I didn't have direct experience. But one of the survivors who was treated at Emory developed eye symptoms probably about 2 months after his very severe illness where he almost died. And his eye lost pressure and his color, he looked in the mirror and the color of his eye was changed, and he also got blurry. So he had one blue eye and one green eye or something like that. It just completely changed. And it was also soft, so it lost kind of all pressure in it. So one of the Emory ophthalmologists who I don't think foresaw that he would now be the world's expert in ocular manifestations of Ebola, worked him up, and they were able to show that he still had Ebola virus in his eye, but was not contagious or anything. So they treated him. I can't remember exactly what they did, steroids, maybe some antivirals, and he completely resolved and got better. So now they have programs in Africa, in West Africa, and now going into the Democratic Republic of Congo to evaluate survivors, because they're finding a lot of eye manifestations in Ebola survivors. So even though it's not a arbovirus, it's still a viral pathogen that may share some of the same kind of predilection for the eye and CNS manifestations. So that's it. No problem.
Okay, Ricardo, any comments about this? What my comment, Desiree, was that I am receiving your request of a donation for ophthalmic equipment to help you in the infectious disease, and I promise you that Pfizer is going to have a very nice set of equipment to document the retina and the cornea. That's what you were asking me, right? It's kind of an indirect request.
Okay, so for tonight, we're done. Thanks so much for coming. And tomorrow, we will try to start exactly on right time, okay? So 7:30, no later than that. We'll be here, and please be on time. Thanks so much. Have a good night. Thank you. So we have the leftover.